Well, hello, you lovely lot. I hope you haven't forgotten about me because it's been some time since I released a new podcast, and I do apologize. I had all the best laid plans over the summer to record them for you, and if anyone here is barking in the background, it's not the hounds of the Baskervilles, it's my dog because I banished him from the room. Because for any of you who've got big dogs like German Shepherds, their noses hurt when they keep headbutting you in the side because they want you to play with them. But anyway, I'm back and I've got quite a few new shows lined up for you to at least take us to the end of 2025. So thank you for being patient and I hope you enjoy what's coming. So for this I suppose almost first show back, I suppose you could say, I've got a wonderful guest. She is incredibly talented, incredibly talented. She's intelligent. She's one of the most genuine people I know. And she is also freaking hilarious. I honestly, every time I speak to her, she'll make me laugh. And all I'm going to say is ask a wanker. Kate Ray, how are you?
What an introduction. You brought a tear to my eye and then finished it off with something crass. I love it.
Well, you know me. I mean, I wasn't going to drop the F-bomb too early in a show, but I've got to say something that sort of makes people think of me, haven't I?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think that will stick in my mind for a long while. I mean, neither of us could remember it, could we? We were both having hormonal brain moment and couldn't remember what it's. And I can't say it. I think it's Ashgawanda, and you interpreted it as a wanker, so you could remember it.
Exactly, and then I forgot it anyway because brain fog. I have to say, we were talking about this when we were at the Parameet in September, Neil Packer's
Yeah.
event, and we were talking. I was saying about the fact that I'd been having quite bad social anxiety in the run up to the event, and Kate was being her amazingly intelligent, scholarly, learned self and telling me about this herb called ashwagandha and I just burst out laughing and said, "You mean ask a wanker?" Because and it went from there, really, didn't it? And I've been waiting to speak to you again, so it's like, well, what was that thing called? Because I didn't write it down. So Ashka. Oh no, ask a wanker. It's much easier.
Yeah, just
Much
ask a
easier.
wanker. Honestly, I don't know whether I pronounce it right or not, so it's probably coming out 50 million ways out of my mouth. So yeah, ask a wanker.
Ask a wanker. Yeah, which is quite good a sort of moral for almost life, really, because you do feel like you have to ask a wanker just about anything these days, which is kind of what we were talking about before we started recording. And we were having a very interesting conversation about how, and I bet there's male listeners going to turn off now going, oh God, here we go, how women in this industry are treated compared
Hmm.
to the men. Now, I am not
Yes.
saying that all men are bad, and I'm not saying all women deserve recognition, far from it.
Mhm.
But you and I were commenting, and you were saying it was quite interesting that quite a prominent event you did recently with the absolutely godlike Brian Blessed. Gordon's live. You were the only one of two women actually presenting
Yes.
on the
Yes.
lineup.
Yes. It was, I mean, it was phenomenal. There was some huge names within the world of 14. And don't get me wrong, these people have been in the game for, 20, 30 years, and they know their subject area very, very well. And for the very first Strange Days festival, it seemed apt that those people were taking those positions. But it's not something that you know women we were saying about women having to really up their game to be
Mm-hmm.
seen. We have to really dot the I's, cross the T's,
Mm-hmm.
make sure that everything that we're saying has a bulk of merit to be taken as seriously. And I don't, that's nothing to do with, I would say, the men predominantly having a conscious thought about that. I just think it's it's a crossover from days gone by when
Mm.
women weren't taken seriously with it within an academic sense, and we do work in a male dominated
Yeah.
playing field, if you like. Nothing against the men in the field at all, because all the ones that I know personally are absolutely brilliant and
Mm,
brilliant minds and do brilliant work. But I do feel like that I have to pedal that bit harder. And I
mm,
think that that's me as well. You
yeah.
know, that I want to pedal harder. I want to be seen and taken seriously in my subject matter.
Mm,
And that, but yeah, it's changing. It's massively changing.
mm.
So hopefully, we'll see a lot more women being revered for their academia and the contributions.
I do wonder if some of it, I mean, it's like when you look at the TV programs,
Hmm.
and I've spoken to a couple of quite prominent female investigator TV. I call them TV female investigators, but they're
Yes.
not just TV female. They've got a lot of more going on behind this
Yeah.
in between their ears than people allow them to show on television. And they've been told that people don't want to see women on doing this stuff. They don't want to see
Yeah.
women doing investigations. And is it because the majority of the audience are women watching them, which I don't think it is. I'd like to see the
No.
demographics actually on some of these programs. So it's like what the split is. But I think about, I mean, obviously I used to play rugby and this
Hmm.
weekend just gone, so people will know when I recorded this show, England women won the Rugby World Cup. Now I've been following
Yeah.
England women probably for a good 25, 30 years since I was young. This year they sold out Twickenham Stadium. They had nearly 82,000 people watching the Rugby World Cup final.
Hmm.
And a lot of the comments from people was that we didn't really realize it was women playing. It was just a really good game of rugby.
Good.
Now, that does sound a bit of a backhanded compliment, but one of the complaints I always used to get from people when I used to play was we don't want to watch some women like just shoving each other and doing nothing else. And what people don't realize until they watch us play is we don't just shove people, we hit them. We
Yeah.
may not hit as hard as a man can because we're physically not the same size, but we're hitting them, we're tackling, we're scrummaging, we're mauling, we're doing all the things, all the
Hmm.
techniques. And to see, and then you had early in the year, didn't you? Had the women's football team.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it makes me wonder: is it slowly changing, or
Hmm.
are we going to hit almost a wall and bounce back slightly? Is there room? I mean, when I talk about the history side of things, workhouse
Hmm.
history, yes, there's quite a few female historians that will talk Victorian and workhouse history. But when I start talking aeroplanes and
Hmm.
military stuff, there's an awful lot of the male old guard, some of whom we know are like,
Hmm.
what would she know? She's a woman. How can she
Hmm.
talk about an aeroplane? And when I've spoken to friends of mine who are aviation engineers and said, God, I love aeroplanes, they're like, really? You're a
Yeah.
girl. Um, is it changing, or have we still got a lot of work to do to realize that we've all got something to add, regardless of our gender?
Mm. I'd like to believe that it's changing. I would like to believe that it's changing, and I think I have to live in a world where I think that the views that women can't play as tough and as hard is something that's an unconscious thought.
Mm,
I think it's a societal unconscious thought as opposed to men. I mean, there are women who are very judgmental of women within the paranormal community. So I hope it does change, and I think one of the things that will come from that is I think when women begin to start supporting other women as well.
yeah.
I think this is one of the things that we have difficulty with. Um, I haven't found that personally. I've found very much that women support each other,
Mm,
but there are that because it's such a small pond and there are very few positions for getting yourself across within this, that it can get a little bitchy, and I think once that happens, once women decide that if we club together, if we stand together and we raise each other up within this community, then we have a platform. We will have that platform instead of pulling people down or questioning. If we remain professional, critical of work and not critical of people, I think that
mm.
that's when the change will occur.
It's a bit, I think you're completely right. And funnily enough, it's a conversation I was having with some non-paranormal friends recently about why do some women hate other women? And I said that
Yeah,
it's because you get what I call the girl's girl and you get the woman's
yeah,
woman. And the woman's woman is the one that will straighten that other woman's crown without there being an ulterior
yes,
motive to it.
yeah,
And I would always rather be one of those. But the problem I find is that I take umbrage to the girls because I know they'll
yeah,
knock my crown off my head at that first opportunity, rather
yeah,
than say to me, I want that same crown as you. How do I get one too? Which
yeah,
is how I work. If I
yeah,
see someone who's achieving something that I would like to achieve,
yeah,
rather than sort of, you know, think of a way to bring them down, I will ask them, how did you do that? How do you
yeah,
achieve that? How did you get that contract? How did you get that magazine deal? How did you get, you know, rather than and learn from them as opposed
yeah,
to stamp on them. And I think that's the difference because I think there are some people that don't realize you can do that. They think the only way to get to where they want to be is to knock you down rather
yeah,
than work with you or
yeah.
um I, there's lots of people I'm envious of, but not in a bitter envious way, more in a, oh, I'd like to achieve that. How do I do that? Is it possible? Can I achieve that? Yeah, I'm jealous of people who are 5'8". Not a lot I can do about that.
Yeah.
But if there's someone who's got, I mean, take someone who I think is doing brilliantly at the moment, is Don't Scare Claire. Her
Yeah.
channel is just, bear in mind, it's only been what, a year, 2 years she's been running
Yeah.
that. It has blown up.
Yeah.
And I've talked to her before and
Mhm.
about it and sort of how did you do it? What was your thought process? What now I'm never going to look like Claire. I'm never going to be Claire's age again.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have, I don't think, an ego. She wants to work
Yeah.
with everyone. She's a woman's
Yeah.
woman, in my view,
Yeah.
which is what you need to be.
Yeah.
Um, and I wish her every success because I think her channel's great. Same
Yeah.
with, I mean, the stuff that you've been achieving over the last year, mate. It's been absolutely mind-blowing. I am so proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
You've got more TV work than me. What's going on?
That's because I'm cheeky and say hello to people, and I am that cheeky person. If I see a project that's developing, I will be the one who will approach and say, I can offer up this. Is this something you'd
Yeah.
be interested in? I'm not particularly somebody who is sought out by, the whole filming industry. And I think that comes down to because it seems like to the outside world that I have so many facets that
Mm,
don't marry up. In my mind, they marry up, but don't marry up, that I don't fit a particular specific box.
mm,
Or if I do, it's not a box that they want. Um, but yeah, that is I literally run my life on look rather than judgment. And
mhm.
I now have been incredibly lucky to come across some fantastic opportunities. I stay in my own lane, and then if I see something that excites me, I will I'll go, hello, can I join in, please?
Yeah,
And invariably, I've had some fantastic projects this year. It's been amazing. It's been an amazing year.
it has been for you, isn't it? Now, one of the
Yeah.
things about you, where if when my son asked me to describe you, and I described you as all those words I said, talented, intelligent, genuine, effing hilarious. I also said you're a bit eccentric. Would that be fair?
That's good.
Yeah?
That's good. I like that. I've not had
Yeah.
that before.
Have you not? Really?
No,
And
no.
and he said, what do you mean by that? I said, Kate comes out and talks about things that nobody else really talks about because we don't
Yeah,
want people to think we're a bit nuts.
yeah.
I said, Barry, and I was talking to him about when we're going to talk about your books at the end of the show.
Hmm.
But one of the things you're quite well known for is your knowledge of fae or fairies. And
Yes.
that's what I wanted to talk about for the next sort of 30, 40 minutes, if that's okay. So
Yeah.
I hold my hands up. Originally, I thought fae meant the little pretty things that you put on top of a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And when I originally booked this interview with you back in the summer, and I said, what do
Hmm.
you want to talk about? And you went, just go off and have a look. We'll talk about whatever
Yeah.
you find. And I was thinking, oh, we're going to be talking about Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
Oh my days. It is so far from Tinkerbell, it's not funny.
Yeah.
If someone came to you now and
Hmm.
said, give me a brief overview what is meant of by Fae,
Hmm.
go on, what would you say?
I would say there's no brief overview at all. And when people ask me, what are fairies? I generally say, okay, I'm going to ask you the question, what are animals? You know,
Oh,
you cannot
nice.
say what animals are in just one or two sentences. And it's the same with the fairy realm. It's so hugely diverse,
Mm.
not only with how things look, but how things function, morals, values. And we have, we have the folklore in it. And is the folklore really what fairies are? We have modern encounters. We have all kinds of things in the mix, lots of different levels. But I'm more and more coming to the conclusion. I mean, I started off, the two worlds collided for me, and I'm more and more coming to the conclusion that there's a reason why fairies are the last taboo within paranormal, and that's because that's where the answers lie. And I
Oh,
genuinely
okay.
believe that we can find the relevant questions to hauntology, to the paranormal, to ufology, to cryptozoology in fairy. I think that that's where the journey should start. And it's a taboo, and I think it's been taken as a taboo because there are so many answers that lie within fairy, whether it be folklore or belief, um, that for whatever reason it has become something that's silly, something that's um, childish, something that's playful, something that's benign, and actually, when you look into it, it's everything other than that, and plays into so many of the motifs within the whole of the 14 spectrum, that it's absolutely untrue. And I think if we unpick fairy and we allow ourselves to unpick fairy, we can literally start unpicking all the other strands to all those other things.
Okay, this might sound a bit of a naive question. Is that
Go
because
for
you
it.
think Fae control ghosts?
No, I think
Oh, okay.
the more I research, the more I find myself in the land of the fairies, no, the theories of that a lot of haunting that we get. And I don't mean the apparitional stuff, and I don't really mean, your great Aunt Bessie coming down to visit. I believe that's fairy. And prior to ghosts, there's a lot of things that would have been attributed to fairy as opposed to ghostly activity. And prior to Christianity, and in terms of demons, those kind of things would have been attributed to fairy.
Right.
Um, so it's not that they're controlling; they are those things. In my mind, I'm moving more and more to your fairies are aliens, and it's about interfacing and the cryptozoology. When you get into less the big cats, the actual physical cryptozoology of alien big cats, etc. But when you get into things like Yetis, Bigfoots, Loch Ness monster, etc., I do believe that they fit within that realm quite nicely. You say this to a paranormal investigator that fairies do haunt and do haunt so intensely that it becomes more problematic than you could ever even imagine. Or you say to a cryptozoologist, yeah, the Bigfoot disappears in front of people because it lives in that other realm, that other dimension. Or you
Mm.
say to a ufologist, the classic greys are how fairy are described in some folklore. And literally, I would be laughed at, shot down,
Mm.
and sort of cut off and I do believe it's become a taboo. How that's become a taboo, I'm kind of unpicking, and it's become a taboo because we're not meant to know those answers, or those answers are hidden from us for some reason. So
Mm.
controlling of those things, no. Controlling of us, yes, to some extent as humans. But I just think it traverses the whole spectrum. It's just so fascinating.
From what you're saying, right? So one of the things I've had to try and get my mind around. since I started researching this is fairy does not mean the little cute little thing a little girl dresses up as,
Yeah.
or a little boy maybe. A little child dresses up
Yes.
with the cute little wings, cute little hair, pink dress,
Hmm.
Tinkerbell job. Fairy is not necessarily a little cutesy pink thing. Fairy can actually be quite a cheeky little so and so who is actually quite hostile. And it's I think it isn't it doesn't it derive from the Latin word fate or some
Yes.
fatter or something like that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that makes it sound a little bit more potentially ominous.
Hmm.
Um, and once I'm still struggling to get my mind away from that because obviously I spent 50
Yeah.
years thinking of fairies as little cutesy things you put on the top of a Christmas
Yeah.
tree. Um, but if it's not, if it's almost an otherworldly entity,
Yes.
it does make it, and fairies, fae can include things like pixies, elves,
Yeah.
leprechauns, gnomes,
Yeah.
all of that kind of thing, which I never thought of fitting them in with fairies. To me, they're just myths, folklore.
Yeah.
Now, yes, I could see one of them would move things, which is obviously one of the things we think is paranormal. Well, it's paranormal because we can't explain it. So a
Yeah.
ghost moves stuff. And when friends of mine have had stuff moved, and they're like, Penny, how do I get it to come back? I said, just ask them to bring it back. Just and next
Yeah.
thing you know, it's been brought back. So
Hmm.
that would indicate some kind of intelligence,
Yes.
almost like a naughty child.
Yeah, and it can range from that kind of trickster
Hmm.
type of, moving things, stealing things, which is, prior to words like poltergeist. Poltergeist activity would have been attributed to a goblin or a house brownie or a pixie. The stone throwing, the apparition of objects, house fires. These things range from that kind of playfulness right into. I mean, I'm more and more moving towards the idea that things like incubus and succubus are fairy. They are of that realm, and if we kind of almost compartmentalize Christianity, put it to one side a minute, and it was within the Christians' benefit to place these creatures within a realm that they could understand as demons. So
Yeah.
we've got characters like the puka, which the word puck comes from, that basically have cloven feet. They can shapeshift. Everything aspect of them is of a devil element. They have that kind of capacity to be able to scratch. Now, I know that within the paranormal community, and I can hear lots of investigators going, "Oh no, what's she talking about?" But within the paranormal community, I cringe every time I hear the mark of three on somebody. So when somebody's marked or scratched with the mark of three, that it's against the Holy Trinity. And I, in my mind, go, that's not. That is the darker, malevolent side of the fairy, because it's said that they have three fingers, one thumb. And that was then taken over into demonology. So you get things like, if we go into the real dark side, you've got the banshee. Banshee is a psychopomp is attached to the notions of death, will wail out the death of a family. So that's one strand. Um, they would steal babies
Mhm.
and take them as their own, replace them with changelings. That was
That's one of the
usually a
things I was
lump
going to
of wood.
talk about. That's one of the notes I put
Yeah,
down. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So they would replace these babies with lumps of wood, or with a child that was no longer representing how they were before.
Hmm.
Now, on a psychological level, that could be a way of people before medicine trying to explain disabilities. That's one theory. But I try to look always from the perspective of the fairy. Why are they doing this? What are their wants and needs? Why would this become so embedded in our unconsciousness as a human society? And I don't mean just in the UK, but Europe, and even when you look further afield, there are these beings within every single culture. Every
Mm.
single culture has these beings, with theories that they were once material and lived alongside us, right the way through to, they are the darkness that we deal with in these crazy situations of when people talk about demonic attachment or demonic possession. These again, we have motifs of fairy within that. It's I genuinely think it's the key to everything. I think it
Okay.
is the key to everything.
Okay. So when I was sort of researching some of it, when I came into this, even though I do have already preconceptions on anything I research, I still try and go in with as an
Yeah,
open mind as possible. I'm still struggling with this, I admit it. I admit it.
yeah, yeah,
But I really thought fairies had come about from the Victorians, like the
yeah,
1800s. That's when we started hearing about it. Because
yeah.
the story that I was very aware of, obviously this wasn't Victorian, this was 1917, but the Cottingley fairies,
Yes.
Elsie and Francis Wright, who
Yeah.
supposedly said they'd captured fairies at the bottom of their garden. Most of us will have seen the photos probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Conan Doyle, who was obviously quite up with the SPR, he said,
Yeah.
"Yep, it's fairies, it's fairies," and then they actually admitted that no, four of the five photos were faked.
Yeah.
Which, when you
Yes.
look at them closely, you can kind of see
Yeah.
they're fake. But they swear that the fifth
Yeah.
photo was genuine.
And that is the crux of that story, is that fifth and final photograph. I mean,
Yeah.
Kodak, said that these aren't photographs that have been doctored in but that fifth photograph, both girls said, yes, that was a genuine photograph.
Mm,
And this is something that runs through a lot of encounters where people have encounters and they are so adamant that they want other people to believe them, that they're not going mad, that they're not making it up, that they put themselves in a place where they generate a story or a mythology that then can be unpicked, unfortunately. But both of them said that fifth photo
mm.
was because the fairies kind of wanted to show themselves on that photograph to prove that the girls were having these experiences. And I genuinely believe that they were having experiences and they wanted the world to understand that. They wanted the world to buy into the fact that they were having these encounters.
But the fairies in that were more the stereotypical cutesy, nymphy fairy with
Yes.
wings, cute little dresses.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
weren't sort of scary, almost pixie leprechaun-y type, almost horror story
Yeah.
type, horror fairies, as
Yes.
I would call them.
Yeah.
Um, is it because can fairies make themselves look a certain way so they can shapeshift, like you said, to make themselves look more appealing? And could they do that to con people into thinking they're good? Or because one of the things also I was reading up as I started going backwards is
Hmm.
that fairies having wings was a relatively modern
Yeah.
interpretation of them. Before that,
Yeah.
fairies were you're almost like ground based, for want of a better term. Your
Yeah.
leprechauns, your gnomes, your pixies, and everything else. And in
Yeah.
fact, you mentioned banshees, which is obviously synonymous with Ireland. Ireland
Yeah.
has a lot of fey lore from what I was
Yeah.
making out. And in fact, some of them, they used to leave their houses open at night. Their front and back door were lined up together
Yeah.
so that the fairies could come straight through the house and
Very.
wouldn't damage anything.
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think doing that in this day and age, you'd have no house left at the end of the night, would you?
No.
Um,
No.
but then as I went, I was sort of thinking, and I was thinking, and I started reading up, and there was like Oberon and Titania were coming up, and I was like, why do those names ring a bell? And I thought Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's
Yeah.
Dream. Probably when I think about it, one of the most famous pieces of literature
Hmm.
that talks about fairies.
Yeah.
So, and supposedly, when I started reading up on it, he'd done a lot of research on fairy lore. And
Yeah.
worse, I'm not Shakespeare's biggest fan.
Hmm.
I still can't forgive him what he did for Richard III, but
Hmm.
he did try and get across almost topics of the day in his plays.
Yeah.
So, why do you think he was trying to open Tudor England
Mhm.
up to fairies? Had he
I
been
think one of
visited
the
by one?
I think so. If you take it from the perspective and it's just one strand of it that we don't know historically about fairies because a lot of it's through oral history.
Mm.
But one of the theories is that it comes from the fates. So it comes this notion that beautiful women, not of this world, of an etherical realm, could impart creativity, whether it's musicians, whether it's playwrights, whether it's artists, and would impart them with a muse, if you like,
Hmm.
a starting point for their consciousness. Now, when you look at wanes in fairy tradition, so when it kind of drops off in popularity, it kind of almost morphs and changes again. And we see that at the turn of the century where we get these winged beings. So we've gone from rural Britain where fairies would have been feared and revered within communities, and there would have been people would have left out milk and honey on a regular basis to appease them. They wouldn't have been spoken about. They were called the fair folk, they were called the good people. They weren't called fairy. You never spoke their name because
Yeah.
they didn't want to invoke them. Then we've got the turn of the century where people started going into more into cities and towns, and you've got advances in technology, the printing press, etc. That I don't know whether so again from a fairy perspective, whether they decided that they had to change tact to stay in people's consciousness, and where scholarly people and people who saw themselves more civilized than their rural counterparts were saying, "Oh, it's all folly. It's all folly. It doesn't mean anything. We haven't got time for superstition of peasants." So, did the fairies then change their tact and start tapping into, the first time we actually see fairies with wings is about that time, and I'm going to get his name wrong. I don't know whether it is actually the pastor or not, but Frizzelli, he
Right.
was one of the early romantic painters, and he was the very first one to paint fairies with wings. And this is quite telling of the time when it was still within the consciousness of the people that fairies weren't benevolent. He actually painted a fairy with bat wings,
Okay.
and it's quite a dark, horrendous painting. But then we start seeing the development into wings of birds or wings of butterflies. It's always insects, and they become very, very small, diminutive, and sexualized. But they remained as a stronghold in the consciousness of people to the point where you would get a bottle of absinthe and it would have the absinthe fairy on, which
Mm.
still remained in the adult realm. You would have pictures of semi-naked ladies with wings on because then it became okay to look at those I suppose soft pornographic pictures within society at that time, but they're still in the consciousness of people. And I wonder whether in the sense of Shakespeare that there was a feeling from the fairy realm that they were losing a foothold in the relationship with human beings. So they tapped into this really big figure within writing and theatre because they knew that they could sustain their message within the human realm through being amused to get this play put on about them. Um, it's just a theory, and I'm constantly trying to strive to think from fairy and not so much from folklore and not so much from a human perspective because we never ask the question why they are the way they are.
Mm.
Why do they come into people's houses and wreak havoc? Why do they visit beautiful young men and women and whisk them away to fairy realm? Why do they bend time and space? All these things. It's like why? Until
Mm.
we get to the crux of why, we can't really start to understand them. But I do think that they will always try and interface with us in a way that within our society we can understand
Yeah.
and constantly be in our collective unconsciousness completely all the time. Like you said, fairy on top of a Christmas tree. Everybody knows that, everybody accepts that. But what does that mean when you bring a fairy into your house on top of a pagan symbol of an evergreen tree and you're placing something that's symbolically not of our world? That's really an invitation to the fairies to
Okay.
partake in your house. When we get to Samhain, when we get to Halloween, from Halloween right the way through to Christmas, that is a period of the fairies.
Okay.
we talk about the associations with that time with the dead, but ultimately it is a time of the other. You go into this darkness, and that's when the veil is thin for them.
So I was just thinking of something else that we're thinking of
Mhm.
things like fairy tales. Hmm?
Yes.
Fairy tales. And I'm thinking the most
Yeah.
famous one are probably
Yeah.
Grimm's fairy tales. And you've got things like Rumpelstiltskin,
Hmm.
the 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 one that lived under the bridge that the goats went over.
Oh, the troll.
The
Yeah,
troll,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah, yeah,
All that kind of thing. Yeah. Memory fog, brain fog.
yeah.
Couldn't even think what that was called then for a second. So could it be that they visited to impart those stories on the Grimm brothers so that they would actually
Yeah.
write them down?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, if you talk to anybody who becomes immersed in fairies, I mean, I can speak from my perspective that I feel like I was hijacked. And I do feel like I was hijacked very, very early on when I became a paranormal investigator. It was almost like these beings were saying, hang on a cotton picking minute. That's not what you think it is, right from
Mm.
the get-go. And I feel like I became some kind of conduit, an advocate for the Fae realm. Um, for what purpose, I don't know, but there are plenty of stories of people who have been used, if you like, for the purposes of fairies, and it's usually those people who are on the creative scale. And when you write about them and you talk about people who write about them, it becomes a compulsion, a real compulsion, and you get um, images and notions that are just mind-blowingly, you just think, well, where did that come from? It's not of your own consciousness. It's almost like things become implanted within your consciousness. And I know this is going into the woo-woo, but I am going to be honest with you about sort of my journey into it. And I did I mean this is something that I don't often talk about, but um I feel like I had a shot across the bows from that realm.
Mm.
I wrote a large article for Haunted magazine, and it was very, very early on when I was developing these notions, these ideas that fairies do haunt. And I put together a whole catalogue of what fairies are, what they do within that environment, etc. And then at the very end, that on one particular day, I um, finished the article with writing how to banish fairies out of your house. You
Right.
know, what do you do if you feel like you have a fairy haunting? And that evening, I had what I can only describe as an encounter. And if other people hadn't been there and witnessed that encounter, I would never ever speak about it because it was incredibly intense and very, very frightening. I was stood outside with a group of people. There was a copse of trees behind me, and we all heard crashing in this thicket
Mm.
of trees and bramble. And the next thing I know, I felt like I was being rushed. It sounded like somebody was running at full pelt to my back, so my
Right.
back was against the trees. I then had, I thought some kind of large bird had got tangled in my hair because I could feel the beating of wings on my head. I put my head down and my mouth filled up with soil. This is just one of the most bizarre phenomena that has ever occurred. And as I came back up from spitting soil out my mouth,
You hadn't
everybody
hit the
around,
ground. Had you hit the ground?
no, my head had gone down because I thought something was on my head.
But you hadn't like hit the ground and got the ground in your mouth. It was coming from whatever had hit your head, pushing into your. Whoa. Okay.
Yes, yeah. And they could see the soil that was coming out of my mouth. They heard whatever was on my head, and they heard something rush up behind me. And they were all that freaked out that they disbanded. I mean, there was probably about three or four of them that were part of a paranormal team.
Hmm.
Um, there were two psychic mediums there, and both of them independently contacted me and said, I psychically saw it. And I think you need to be really worried because they explained that they'd seen a devil.
Okay.
Now, I pretty knew instantly what it was. So we've got demigods and gods from the pagan realm. such as Canunos, who are of the fairy realm. That they are the fairy realm, and I definitely felt like it was some kind of incredibly powerful nature spirit that was like, you do not write how to get rid of us. You don't do that. We're fine with you writing about us. We're fine with you giving out information, but you do not tell people willy-nilly what it is to banish us. And I took that part of the article out.
Mm.
And never ever published that part of the article. But the coincidence of that happening, and it was one of the strangest occurrences that I've ever had,
Yeah.
whether in a haunted property or otherwise. And like I say, if those other people hadn't been stood round and witnessed what had happened and been so freaked out by the occurrence, and there was no denying the occurrence. It was just nobody could see anything physical, nobody could see any physicality of it. I would never speak of it. I would never ever talk about that. But I do believe that if we overstep the mark with fairies, they are going to tell us. They are going to make sure that we know. Um, yeah, and that was my freaky
Wow.
experience of being shot across the bow.
Well, I mean, I've told you about my weird, as I call it, my Tinkerbell experience, haven't
Yes.
I? So for people who don't know about that, I mention it in actually a couple of my books I've mentioned it in, but in detail, where I used to live in Norfolk, I would have been about 10 or 11,
Hmm.
probably nearer 10. So my sister would have been 7 or 8. And there was this old barn, very blackened old barn. It was derelict.
Yeah.
And we used to dare each other to look into it in case it was haunted, as kids
Hmm.
do. And because this village, middle of nowhere, only about 200 people live there, everyone knew everyone else. We used to walk our dog at
Yeah.
weekends and in school holidays. And we'd been walking our dog and we dared each other to look through where the door was kind of pulling apart, like where the door panels was,
Facts. Yeah.
there was holes in them. We dared each other to look through. And I remember seeing a really, really bright light
Hmm.
moving around. And it wasn't following any particular air path. It was kind of
Hmm.
darting. If we'd had glowing insects in this country, I'd have thought possibly that's what it was. But obviously we don't have insects like that in this country. And yes, it was a bright day, but the it wasn't the sun shining in because of the way it was darting around. But the weird thing about it was that it was like time stood still and
Yes.
it flew up to where we were looking through the door, hovered. It's literally just I say it's like Tinkerbell out of Peter Pan because it was this just bright light
Yes.
and then just vanished.
Yeah.
And we thought we'd been stood there for sort of 10 seconds,
Hmm.
but we realized it was minutes, not
Yeah.
seconds. And the dog had gone to sleep at our feet, but we couldn't move to begin with.
Yeah.
We couldn't move to get away.
Hmm.
Now, I it was only from talking to you once that I wondered perhaps I'd seen something from the fairy world. Somebody
Hmm.
else has said to me maybe it was an angel,
Hmm.
possibly, but it was the fact that we were frozen to the spot. We could
Yeah.
not move. And
Hmm.
also time stood still.
Yeah. I mean, that's classic. The fact that time's been manipulated is a classic fairy motif.
Right.
Absolutely classic. And I mean, we can get into the realms of. I know it's a big bugbear within the paranormal community, but orbs. Now, orbs traverse all phenomena, all
Mm,
phenomena. So, people who've had Bigfoot encounters will often have orb experiences, and I don't mean on photographs or on videos.
mm.
I mean actually seeing orbs. We see that motif within ufology. That's another place. But fairies, I do like the theory that when people see that bright light, and usually comes in an orb form before it actually forms into something, that orb is actually the portal, if you like, between realms. So
Okay.
what we're seeing is a pressure of energy as something comes through from one dimension to the other. People also talk about a popping sound, a crackling sound, or
Right.
a talk type sound, especially with things like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, etc. They have that phenomena that go off, but it is something that traverses the lot. So light beings, and I wonder whether that then sort of spilt over into angel phenomena as well, that they became these light beings to represent that they came from a different dimension, that they were traveling through on a different dimension. But yeah, I mean that sounds like an absolute classic fairy encounter. And I often ask people, um, what were your feelings afterwards, and did it change something within you after that occurrence?
Confusion. And it made me more open mentally
Hmm.
to things I couldn't explain
Yeah.
because it was probably shortly after that that a lot more weird things started. I started seeing things like I think chronologically it was either just before or just after that I had the experience where I thought I'd seen my dad had come home because my dad used to work
Hmm.
away from home.
Yeah.
And again, I think I've told this story in Peggy that I'm sat in our living room and we had a glass door. My mum and my
Hmm.
sister were watching television, so was the dog. And the house is in the middle of nowhere. No hat cars didn't come past. And I saw car lights illuminate the hall, which would have meant someone was
Hmm.
driving onto our driveway. And then I saw a shadow come and go up the stairs. I saw it through the door because
Yeah.
the lights were off, and I saw this shadow go. And I thought that was my dad had come home to surprise us. And I go running out the living room. There's no one there.
Yeah.
And things like that started happening more and more. Now,
Hmm.
I've never had an experience like the orb Tinkerbell,
Hmm.
as I call it. I have seen
Yeah.
orbs with my own eyes. I
Yeah.
have. And I'm one
Yeah.
of those that I was actually having this conversation with my American friends earlier this week. Like, what do we think of orbs? And my argument is that yes, I think you can probably quantify that 99.99% of them are
Hmm.
insects, dust,
Yeah.
camera glitches.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can say unequivocally all of them are, and I definitely don't
Mm.
think you can say they are when you see them with your naked eye. And
Exactly.
I think I've seen three with my naked
Yeah.
eye. One was Tinkerbell. One
Hmm.
was at Drakelow Tunnels
Yeah.
where there was no electricity. So it couldn't,
Yeah.
somebody said it's an electric spark. There's no electricity in that part. It can't be.
Yeah.
And the other was actually I had one recently. It was last weekend, believe it or not, at one of our theatres
Wow.
in it was in Chelmsford. And I've got to do some more research into this. But our theatre in Chelmsford, it's a 1970s theatre, but one of the ghosts is meant to be a white orb that is seen floating
Hmm.
around, and it's supposed to be either he was the electrician or a stagehand or something that loved working there so much he comes
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Now, we were watching this comedian. It was in quite the small part, a small, not the main theatre, but like the side theatre. And I kept seeing this white light just darting around the wall. And
Hmm.
so I'm looking for where the stage lights are pointed. They're not pointed towards where I'm seeing this light. I'm looking to see if anyone's got a watch that is
Yeah.
reflecting. I couldn't see the source of it. And it's the fact it wasn't in the same place. It was all
Yeah.
over the place. That was only weekend before last. I saw that, and I did know that that is one of the um, supposed hauntings from that theatre,
Mm.
that this white orb is seen darting around. But that was with my naked eye.
Yeah.
Now, being who I am looking for a reason that could be causing it, and the most obvious reason is someone's watch face
Yeah.
reflecting. But that wouldn't work if it's different areas of the theatre. Every
Yeah.
time I look, it's moved to a different part of the theatre. It's not in the same place
Yeah.
every time. That doesn't, so that would have meant that 20 people's watches were reflecting in
Hmm.
sync with each other, like one after the
Yeah.
that seems a bit, I mean, it could be that, but so yeah, but so when people say about orbs, yes, if it's captured on camera, I'm a little bit,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
naked eye, I think it's a lot harder.
Yeah. It
Is it
is. It
done?
is. And I think when you have those experiences, I mean, I've always entrusted that they are part of the paranormal world, because I used to live in a property that the house next door mirrored the two houses were built by the same family. So part of the family lived one side, the other part of the family lived the other side, but they're a
Hmm.
mirror image. And as I was growing up, my brother would complain that he had lights in his room. And my
Hmm.
parents put it down to car lights, far away, coming up over a hill and hitting into the room. And we were talking about it with our next door neighbours. Now, my next door neighbours had grown up. The lad, he'd grown up as a lad in that house, and we were talking about it, and he told us that when he was younger himself, and I think it was his older brother, they would have these orbs in the house that were that solid, that they used to play tennis with the backs of books with these orbs and back them to each other, and didn't think anything of it because it was just a natural occurrence within their property that they would have these,
Oh, it's
you know,
awesome.
yeah, almost solid, that they could just knock them and they would fly about. So it's always been in my lexicon of, yes, it is a paranormal occurrence, and I know
Yeah.
it's something. But I think this is something we were discussing off camera, that the more people debunk and rationalize to the point of degradation of a particular phenomena, the less liable we are to actually get an answer about what that phenomena is. I mean, orbs,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, are absolutely age old. We've got Willow the Wisp. So let's go back
Hmm.
to fairies. Willow the Wisp were fairies. These were marsh lights that would lead people to their deaths. So these are age old phenomena. And the more that we pick them apart to say, no, it's not anything, the less liable we are to get an answer to
Mm.
what these things are. And yeah, I'm with you. I'm no expert on film and camera, but there are a lot that people send me. And even just looking at them from the perspective of not being a scientist, you can see that there are, that it correlates with water droplets, it correlates with dust, it correlates with insects. But let's not say because of that these things don't exist.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, it's one of the things we were talking about offline. It's sometimes you when you've seen 1,000 of them, you can normally pick out what it's going to
Yeah.
be. But if that person gets comfort from thinking
Mhm.
that is great grandma June coming to
Yeah,
visit, what harm is there?
exactly.
I just kind of feel as long as they're not trying to make £100,000 by selling it to the Daily Mail or other
Yeah,
newspapers do exist.
yeah,
I don't see what the issue is.
yeah,
Um, Coming back to the whole Fae thing, I mean,
yeah,
we've talked about up to sort of Shakespeare's time.
yeah,
We can go even further back because it was an Essex boy who wrote about them in the 12th century,
yeah,
Gervase of Tilbury.
yeah,
So it's obviously been very central in people's minds for millennia.
yeah, yes.
Is it, why would it be, do you think, that they were more willing to let humans know how to work with them, for want of a
Hmm.
better word, than now? Is it because they think, well, people don't believe in us, so why should we even try?
Hmm.
Or is it, almost that they're so horrified with what we've done to the world? And are they linked to elementals in that respect? Is there a correlation between them
Oh,
and
there's a lot,
elementals?
a lot to unpick there. So I'm not particularly fond of the term elemental because it has been something that's bantered about. And elemental actually goes back to Paracelsus, the dead science of alchemy. Elementals were the elements. So
Hmm.
Paracelsus put them into, um, the four elements of earth, water, fire, and air, and they became the gnomes, the sylphs, the undines, and the salamanders, and it was used in alchemaic magic and in occult magic even today as representative of those elements. So I'm not particularly fond of the word elemental, although I do understand that it's a bit more palatable for people to use elemental, um, because it doesn't have those Tinkerbell connotations.
Hmm.
So going back historically, I mean, we didn't really start writing about fairies until writing existed, if you like, but
Mm.
they were always there. They were with really ancient cultures right from the get-go, whether, that there is crossovers into demigods, hearth goddesses, that kind of thing that became more what we'd think about as house goblins and house elves, that people would summon these things into existence to help protect, to help with harvests, but they would always appease and treat them like demigods. They would give gifts, small sacrifices. And I don't mean, unaliving sacrifices. I mean, giving the first milk of a cow
Hmm.
to these things, that kind of thing. But prior to it being written about, it was absolutely known. Now there are theories that fairy did exist alongside us, and something went terribly wrong. I mean, this is very much in. I'm not an expert in Irish folklore or Celtic fairy folklore, but something went terribly, terribly wrong with the relationship between humans and fairies,
Hmm.
and they took themselves into their own realm. They went underground. So again, we start seeing the links between fairies and the dead, that they are underground. The dead are interned underground, but they went underground. And they didn't have the same relationship with us anymore. Are they disgusted of what we're doing to the planet? I think there is a very neo-pagan kind of grip on the notion of fairies, that they are nature spirits, and to an extent that they very much are. You have a raft of fairies that are nature spirits, but that's not all they are.
Okay.
And yeah, there is consequences for actions that go against that impedes on their environment, the things that they look after. But again, that's only one small notion of what fairies are. So they took themselves off, and I've got this growing theory. I heard a really good podcast last night, and it's one of the very few podcasts that I listen to regularly, called Spirit Box. And I've got to mention it because he gets some fantastic guests on. But he was talking to, and I'm having a look to the side because Nathaniel Gillis, who is a demonologist,
Hmm.
and he was talking about all things being under the umbrella of demonology, that all things could be explained through demonology. And all the way through, I was thinking, you don't mean demon, you mean fairy, because these are the same motifs. And he was talking about, and this very much is a motif of fairy, that demons don't want to take your immortal soul. They actually want to hybridize, because they struggle with reproduction.
Hmm.
It's the same with ufology. When you look at classic greys,
Hmm.
there is that theory of hybridization, because struggling with fertility. Now, whether that's on an occult, esoterical level, that they are breeding into non-material beings, or whether they are actually hybridizing physically into this world. But I do get that notion, and from some of the folklore, that fairies cannot reproduce, and that's why they stole children, and that's why they took human lovers, because they find it hard to reproduce. So they create these hybridized beings to keep their bloodline going, which would make sense a lot of the time. And fairy doesn't make sense, let me tell you. Their values and morals don't make sense at all. Um, but it's mind blowing, the crossovers, and it's mind blowing to think about where they are, who they are, what they're doing, why they're doing it. I don't think they have that. And again, going back to neo-paganism, I don't think they have that hatred towards humans, in the fact, in a Greenpeace type of way,
Yeah.
that we are destroying the planet. I don't think hatred's not the right word, but I think maybe jealousy, maybe looking at us as, we once were of this realm and now we're not, because of humans and because of war and whatever. It's a really complex, and the more you kind of unpick not just UK and European fairy lore, but across the globe, the more you unpick it, the more you think, I know nothing.
Mm.
I genuinely know nothing, and it's like rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and that's why I love it as a subject.
It's never ending. You'll never know it all.
No, or even the start of it sometimes.
Well, I mean, we've been talking for over an hour, and I'd
No,
say we have, and I would say we've not even scratched the surface. We've probably touched a couple of
no,
great grains of soil about this.
yeah.
If people want to learn more,
hmm
where do you recommend they go?
I always say to people, the best thing to do is put it out into the universe that you want to learn more and then just go for whatever you're attracted to. For me, the starting point was the work of Brian Froud. And it was the first time that I'd come across anybody who I felt really understood what fairies looked like.
Right.
And that was my entry point. I mean, I could give a raft of books and websites and whatever you, but it depends what you want to find out. If it's the folklore that people want to delve in, or whether it's the fairyology, or whether it's modern encounters, it's I would say just whatever floats your boat, just go for. I think I said to you with the research, just let it lead you.
You
Just let
did.
it lead you.
You did,
Yeah,
yes. And I
because
hadn't
I
even
could give you.
the first bit I found out, Seelie and
Yeah,
Unseelie. That was the first thing I
yeah,
found out. But
yeah.
then when I went back to redo it more recently, that didn't even come up. And it was all
No,
the Titania and Oberon and everything else. So just re-going back, it's leading me. And I'm a big believer in you get led where you want to get
yes,
led. I know when you sort of talk about doing the history for help, sometimes I'll find a story that is like so mind-blowing. Can I find it again the next
yeah,
day? If I haven't made a note of it, no.
yeah,
Fate pulls you the way you need to go
yeah,
that day.
yeah.
And I'm a big believer in that. So if anyone wants to contact you to get sort of your
Mhm.
opinion on things or just have a chat with you about all of this, how do they get hold of you, Kate? I mean, I know how to get hold of you, but how do they get hold of you?
I'm on Insta. It's Kate Haregirl, hair as in bunny rabbit, one word. And I'm Kate Haregirl Rae. It's spelled differently. I tried to go underground years ago by spelling my surname differently. So it's Rae, as in Faye Ray.
Okay.
So if you look Kate Rae Rae on there, then you can find me. And I love talking to people about their experiences. Um, Oftentimes, I am a point of contact for people who will start off a conversation with, "I've never told anybody this before,"
Mm.
because nobody would ever believe me. And those are the conversations I really love having.
Same here. I get those with aeroplane sightings. The amount of
Yes.
emails I get, and I can honestly say I love getting these. I've never told anyone this story, but in
Yeah.
1983, I was driving along, and then they start
Yeah.
telling me the story, and I have actually identified quite a few aeroplanes for people and worked out there was an airfield right next to them that had that air,
Yeah.
and it's when you start doing that, it's such, I don't know about you, I find it such an honor and so exciting
Yes.
when people want to tell me
It
their
is.
stories. But I mean, you've got the wonderful Hare in the Hawthorn,
Yes.
sort of what podcast, vlogcast kind of thing, because that's on YouTube, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you've got two books,
I've got 3 books. I
three
co-authored a
now,
book
is
quite
it?
recently.
Did you?
3 now, and
Oh,
yeah, I mean, I've written for Puka Press, which is Simon Young. I've written for him a few times. Um, More academic looks at different fairy phenomena. I did one on the Woollerton gnomes, and I also did one Cottingley fairies, and there's another one coming up. Um, I wrote for our dear friend Kate Terrell.
mhm.
Cheryl. I always make her name sound posher than it is. She always tells me off.
She tells me off as well, but I
For
noticed on her recent thing she did when she was investigating Shepton Mallet for and I've just complete
Supernatural
that's the
UK.
one, that's the one. He
Yeah,
called her Dr. Kate Sherrill, and I did that little chuckle out when I heard that pronounced because
yeah,
I wonder if she knew he'd called her Dr. Kate Sherrill. Apparently it's Cheryl. She ain't that posh,
yeah,
she's told me. I've told her she is,
yeah.
and she's Dr. Sherrill or Dr. Goth,
She is.
as I call
I
her.
like Sherelle. It suits her. Sherelle. It's
It
kind of
does,
that
doesn't it?
gothicy Victorian, yeah,
Yeah.
lady type
Yeah, I
thing.
think we should rename her. We're renaming her. It's now Sherelle. Yes.
It is forevermore. I got to write about some Lincolnshire supernatural stuff for her book, Out of This World. That's
That's the
on.
one. Yep.
Yeah, and the main ones for me is this was a couple of years ago, available on Amazon. I don't know whether you can see that very well.
The
So this is the
Curious
Woolly
Case of
Snot.
the Willerton Gnomes. Yes.
Yeah, that's based on a true story. And then from that, not based on a true story, is the second one in the series, which
The-
is a reluctant quest for the Woolly Snots, which is called the Boggers, which I based on Greek epics, the Greek
Okay.
epics. Um, so yeah, and the newest one, the latest one, is called Fade Away. This isn't available
Oh.
on Amazon just yet. So if people want to get in contact with me, you can get a signed copy directly from me. This is a chunk.
Is that fiction
I'd
or
like
non-fiction?
This is fiction. I'd
Fiction.
like to say that I had some hand in writing it, but I wasn't. I was research author.
Hmm.
So a good friend of mine, Mark Jones wrote it. It's very well written. If people like sort of that 1970s retro vibe, it can get a little bit spicy in there. It's about a woman in search of the fairies and in search of the answer
Okay.
across the British landscape. It's a really, really good read. So they're the three biggies. There's another one of these Fade Away coming out pretty soon, that I've
Awesome.
helped with the research of, and sort of putting them in the right direction. So
Cool.
yes, and by spring I should have the third in the Woolly Snot saga. So
Hey, keeping yourself busy, girl.
just a bit keeps me out of trouble.
I know, I know. And event-wise, what I mean, obviously you've been very busy this year. We've bumped into each other at a few events, which is always a
Yes.
pleasure, never a chore. What else have you got coming up?
So I've got a podcast next week, and I'm mentioning it because this is the first time it's ever happened. And this, I wish as a podcaster I could do this for people. I'm being put up in a retreat before so that I
Wow.
can decompress before it's just what out so overnight. Never heard of it before. Never heard of it. Haven't got the name of that. It's on the tip of my tongue. It might come back to me. From there on in, I've got a really, really busy October. I've got the Three Wishes. No, sorry, the Fairy Fair in Glastonbury, which
Hmm.
is a big one. I'm giving a talk at that about gnomes,
Yes, you
as
do.
you'd assume, as you do. I'm then the week after I'm doing some filming, but that's all kind of
Hush, hush.
under the radar, under the
Hmm.
radar. And then early in November, I've been asked to talk at Cardiff University.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, I'm so obviously you and I again, we were talking offline about how long we've known each other and
yeah.
seeing how your career in the world of the paranormal is progressing is it's phenomenal that you're breaking down like those boundaries and people are listening to you and I do think I mean I said at the beginning how intelligent you are. I think the way you've spoken on this interview I think that really, really, your knowledge is phenomenal on this subject.
I think
So,
I'm gonna leave this talk with a head that swelled to the size of a giant basketball. But thank you very much for the compliments.
no, it's
I think
true.
the biggest thing for me, the biggest compliment that I get is when people say, I was so skeptical it was uncomfortable with this subject, but
Mhm.
actually you've made me think.
Yeah,
And that's what I endeavour to do, to make people think.
good. Well, you made me think just from doing the research for this and realizing what a huge the misconceptions that I had about Fae and what they are and everything else. So, thank you ever so much. Well,
No, thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed that episode with myself and Kate Rae. Obviously, do go and check out Hair in the Hawthorn. I will put the links up to her Facebook page and everything when I share out this show. Do let me know what you think. There goes the dog again. Do let me know what you think. And if there's anything you'd like me to cover on haunted histories over the next, well, in 2026, I'd be happy to look into it. But on that note, good night. Have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.